12 elders of an unknown species deliberately extinguished their own core temperatures. He watched them through the thermal link, their biosignatures winking out one by one as they hardened into lifeless statues, sacrificing their heat so the rest of the fleet could survive. The cold creeping up Kalen's arms wasn't his own. Whose memories was he absorbing? Have you ever felt the weight of an entire dying civilization resting against your own chest? What would you do to keep them breathing? 14 hours ago, the hardest decision Kalen faced in the Zenith outpost was whether to report the malfunctioning climate control in his quarters. Now, the emergency wall panel button mocked him. Beneath the observation deck, Sector 4 had always been a quiet graveyard of forgotten cargo. He woke up expecting the harsh beep of his alarm, not the freezing weight of an alien fugitive crushing his ribs. Lyra, though he wouldn't learn her name until the fever broke, was an obsidian kin. Her skin was the color of volcanic glass and held the ambient temperature of deep space. She was completely unresponsive. Frost rapidly crystallized across Kalen's standard-issue sleep shirt, where her cheek pressed against his collarbone. Panic. The instinct to survive screamed at him to shove her off. His eyes darted to the emergency wall panel button, glowing a steady, harsh red in the dim light of his quarters. One strike of his palm against that console would summon outpost security in seconds. It would mean safety. It would also mean protocol, quarantine, and inevitable dissection by Gaia Prime Command for a creature that had clearly bypassed their perimeter shielding. Instead of reaching for the alarm, his hands moved instinctively to the heavy, insulated, radiant weave blanket crumpled at the foot of his bunk. The principle of thermal equilibrium dictated that heat would always flow from a warmer body to a colder one until both reached parity. For humans, rapid heat loss meant hypothermia, organ failure, and a quiet death. For the obsidian kin, whose crystalline cellular structures functioned like immense thermal batteries, ambient heat was the literal engine of their consciousness. Without it, their minds simply halted, locked in a frozen stasis that eventually fractured their neural pathways. Kalen wasn't just warming her, he was actively jump-starting her cognitive core. He wrapped the heavy weave around them both. A low hum, then nothing. The station's environmental system strained against the sudden localized drop in temperature. Kalen held her tight against his chest, gritting his teeth as the brutal chill leached the warmth from his own blood. It was agonizing. Every breath he exhaled plumed into white vapor, yet beneath the icy exterior of her skin, he felt a strange, resonant pulse. It wasn't a heartbeat. It was a rhythmic, thermal transmission, a desperate broadcast of raw emotion and history flowing directly into his nervous system. He saw flashes of 12 dying ships. He felt the vast, suffocating terror of a species hunted to the edge of space, which meant quarantine was already a death sentence. If you want to see how far a human will go to protect the vulnerable, subscribe and join us for the rest of the journey. The thermal transfer deepened, blurring the lines between Kalen's memories and hers. He felt the jagged edge of her desperation. She had crashed her scout vessel intentionally, breaching the outer hull to bypass the primary sensors. The realization hit him with physical force. Her ship's impact had exposed multiple adjacent sectors to the vacuum of space, a catastrophic failure that the outpost's automated systems were only just beginning to register. The reinforced door of his quarters shuddered violently. Outpost security was already here, tracing the localized pressure drop and anomalous temperature readings. Heavy boots slammed against the metal grating outside. The locking mechanism on his door sparked, groaning under the assault of a plasma torch. The heavy reinforced door of Kalen's quarters collapsed inward, with a deafening crash of sheared metal. Commander Vance stood in the ruined threshold with a plasma rifle raised, flanked by 3 security officers. The order from command was simple: quarantine the crash survivors. The reality of keeping them alive was treason. Vance's weapon wavered as she took in the sight of her junior technician huddled on the floor, wrapped in a radiant weave with the intruder. Kalen did not flinch. He reached out with a trembling, frostbitten hand and grabbed the commander's wrist, forcing her bare skin against Lyra's crystalline shoulder. They communicated not with words, but with the raw, transferable heat of a dying world. Vance gasped as the thermal transfer hit her nervous system. She saw the same devastation Kaylin had witnessed. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were wide, the strict military protocol dissolving into horrified comprehension. 12 more refugee ships were already on long-range scanners, desperate and failing. Gaia Prime Command had authorized lethal force if they attempted to board, which meant they had to disappear. To save a dying species, a research crew had to dismantle their own space station and vanish into the void. Vance initiated the unthinkable. Klaxons wailed as explosive bolts systematically severed the Zenith outpost into autonomous, thermally cloaked fragments. Admiral Korath's military destroyer dropped out of hyperspace just as the final tethers detached. Heavily armed Marine squads breached the main promenade, demanding immediate surrender and the forcible extraction of the aliens. Korath marched toward the command fragment, her face a mask of furious authority. Kaylin stepped directly into her path. He didn't argue. He simply offered his hand, already glowing with the residual heat of a dozen shared consciousnesses. Korath struck it away, but the momentary contact was enough. The transfer flooded her mind with the agonizing terror of the hunted, dropping the seasoned admiral to her knees. And while Director Olan's remote override barked over the comms, Korath's Marines slowly lowered their weapons. The fragmented outpost pieces engaged their thrusters just as the 12 dying refugee ships drifted into the sector. The cold creeping up Kaylin's arms returned, sharp and absolute. He watched the arriving vessels through the thermal link, realizing the biosignatures winking out weren't just a memory anymore. The Elders were executing the transfer now, shedding their final warmth to supercharge the cloaking fields of the fleeing station fragments. Their sacrifice created a massive thermal bloom that blinded Gaia Prime's sensors. The pursuit vessels plunged right through the dissipated heat signature, finding nothing but empty space. The fragmented convoy slipped past the blockade completely invisible, carrying the surviving refugees toward a distant, uncharted habitable world. 6 months later, the twin suns of Nova Dawn baked the salvaged metal of the central plaza. Kaylin stood beside Lyra, her skin absorbing the alien sunlight, radiating a gentle, steady warmth against his arm. They watched Terrans and the refugees working together to weld a hybrid society from the ruins of their pasts. Kaylin looked down at his hand, tracing a faint frost scar across his knuckles. He thought about a harsh red emergency button on a wall light years away, and the fragile, beautiful universe that would have burned if he had pushed it. Would you risk everything you know for a stranger whose heart beats in a different rhythm? The universe is vast, and the next connection might change your life forever. We'll be here tomorrow with another story from the Edge.